everyone. My name is Fernanda.
And I'm Amy, and we're product designers and strategists.
And today we're going to be talking to you about designing for empowerment and our experience in doing so. And we're going to be doing that through the lens of a partnership that we actually had with an organization called FreeFrom. And FreeFrom empowers survivors of domestic abuse by helping them achieve economic justice and financial independence. So as we know, change is inevitable. It's happening everywhere, all over the world. But we believe design has the ability to put intentionality and purpose to that change. And therefore, we believe it is more important now than ever for technologists and designers to harness the power that we have to actually create solutions that empower the voiceless and marginalized in our society, which is why we picked working with this organization. But before we start talking about our lessons learned, we want to talk a little bit about the context of domestic abuse. 1 in 4 women in the United States is a survivor of domestic abuse. That means you probably know someone close to you or in your circle that has been in this situation. As you probably know, with the abuse comes a lot of financial dependence and insecurity that's then fueled even more by fear and shame. This only keeps the victim from leaving the relationship or actually has them coming back to the abuser over and over again. So our goal going into this partnership was to really find a way to demystify financial compensation and make it accessible for people. And in doing so, we thought we could really have a big impact on survivors by showing them that they're actually not alone, that they have options to move forward, and that there are organizations and systems in place to support them.
So we set out to build Get Compensation. Get Compensation is a fully functional, responsive web application that helps survivors of domestic violence and abuse understand the financial compensation options available to them. They answer a few statements about their position, about their current position, and they receive a description, a mindset, or an archetype, and the compensation that is corresponding to that. Designing for empowerment was not easy. And through the design and the development of this digital tool, we ran into a lot of challenges. Those led to defining some principles that informed our practice as designers, and today that's what we're going to share with you. We think that they're inspiring and hope that you can use them in your practices too. This is a quick overview of the 4 principles we're going to be talking about. This is just at a glance. We're going to dive into each of them separately. And so they are the interpreter, the guide, the coach, and the mirror. So let's get started. The first principle is the interpreter, or what we're calling design for translation. This principle is about translating language to an approachable, everyday conversational tone that presents the information to the user in a relatable way. So it makes sense to the user and they feel confident in whatever they're pursuing. Language is a really powerful tool, and disciplines like law tend to kind of make things overly difficult for people to understand. And survivors are no different in this case, and they often have to use lawyers to help translate what compensation and what compensation options are. And because they can't do this on their own, it emphasizes this idea of victimhood. So there really is a very legitimate reason for an idea of a translator here to help out. So that's the principle. So how does it look when we apply that principle to what we designed? Well, we moved from that legal point of view, that legalese, to the point of view of the user, the survivor in this case. Starting with the welcome page and throughout the experience, as you'll start to see, we focused on using everyday language that was direct and casual, kind of like speaking to a friend. For example, in this case, there was a word like defendant, and then defendant in this case actually means the abuser and not the survivor. So we just went ahead and used the word abuser instead because it made more sense to this particular set of users. So keeping language friendly is really great, right? But beyond language, we still needed to know how the survivors thought and then what the actual need here was. So that led us to our second principle, the guide. Now, the guide was also like how we designed for direction, right? So in this principle, we directed the experience through these bigger chunks that users personally identify with. They were, in a way, handrails for the experience, didn't make the decision for them, but guided them in a way so that they could make the decision for themselves. So really, we were about understanding the user's priorities and translating those into criteria that could reflect more what they were interested in, and steer them through the process of understanding so that ultimately they could make the decision for themselves. So how did we apply this principle? What did it look like in the actual web application? We took those criteria that survivors need to qualify for any given compensation option and turned them into categories that were really approachable, like the likelihood of getting an award or safety. In this case, you see the one for safety. So instead of one question and one answer, we actually presented statements with multiple options, and each of those options are actually valid answers that guided the experience for them to choose, right? So they had enough room to make that decision themselves based on that moment in time. For example, in addressing the topic of safety, we tell the survivor that some avenues, not all, may require them to go to court, which means they will confront that abuser, right? So whether or not how safe they feel at that time, they pick one of the statements that best describes the amount of safe feeling they have at that time. So guiding folks through a process like this and giving them friendly language is great, but people and situations evolve, and what matters to them now might not matter to them in 3 months. So,
which brings us to our third principle, the coach, or how to design for growth. Give the user a place to start in the system, or give them the opportunity to change and evolve as they go through this. Any person going through any process is probably going to change priorities. They might come back, retake the quiz, get different results, change their minds over and over again. They do not have to be locked down by a specific outcome. And the continued development of these people actually is their solution to be able to deal with all the nuances of the problem that they're facing. So how did we actually apply this principle? We created a series of archetypes or mindsets based off of a collection of different statements that they answered. Although they're related to a specific compensation avenue, these mindsets are really more like a state of mind for the user. Think like a BuzzFeed quiz, something where like, what type of character are you, or your personality type? And these allow them to basically change their mind over time. So as they go through this healing process, they discover new things about their circumstances and themselves. So we had to design something that was flexible and would allow us to grow and evolve with them. So for example, someone at the beginning of the process might identify themselves as a resilient planner, which is one of the archetypes that we have up there. And the resilient planner is really more about safety than anything else. That's their priority. But later on in the process, a survivor might come back and actually be more of a justice seeker, which is a person that's willing to take more risk and actually even go to court to get more compensation for the abuse suffered. So understanding how to help them grow and evolve and be flexible in the system is great, but not enough. We actually need to show them what options they have so they can actually take action, which is what we're trying to get out of this. Which brings us to our fourth and final principle, the mirror, or how to design for reflection. Show the user all their responses assembled in the same place. Allow them to make their own choices by becoming more of a mirror and reflecting back the necessary information. This way, the meaningfulness is inferred by their own evidence rather than an external opinion. They guide the process themselves based on their own experiences and therefore making a more empowered decision. So how do we actually apply this? We found that it resonated a lot with survivors to see the selections that they have made at the end in a list in the last screen. So for example, we took something like VOCA, which is Victims of Crimes Act, which is one of the compensation avenues that exists. And we showed all the answers that the survivor had for each one of those categories, like time, cost, award, likelihood. We matched their answers to the compensation avenue in a way that resonated with their personal stories. On top of that, we list benefits, challenges, and how-tos for each one of the compensation avenues so that they actually have the information they need to make a decision and move forward. So these 4 principles are not rules set in stone. They're simply areas that we found important to consider as we're designing for empowerment, and we wanted to share with you today. In closing, we would like to leave you with the thought. Free From refers to their clients as survivors rather than victims. Survivor is a more empowering term. It connotates resilience and strength, and it moves the person from a state of victim to actually an empowered place. It gives them back their power. Thank you very much.